For the world you love, your will be done. Let your will be done in me. For you and you alone. Awake my soul, awake my soul, and sing.
Good evening. The topic for discussion in our Connect groups this evening is going to be fairness. It's interesting, isn't it? Fairness, I think, is something that's built into us. I think is a reflection of the fact that we're created in the image of God, that there's this innate sense of right and wrong, of equitableness and justice and fairness. I mean, you can take 3 or 4-year-olds, and if somebody takes their toy or somebody plays with something they don't want to play with or whatever, what are they going to say? That's not fair. It's just not fair. I mean, real early on, we understand this idea of our picture of how things ought to be. But the fact of the matter is that when you start talking about fairness, I believe that we got to be very careful, because there can be a contextualization of fairness, a selfishness involved, and the idea of fairness that can kind of bend it a little bit. Let me explain, kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. Let's say that you are at a football game, and your team has got down to the half-yard line, and there's 2 seconds to go in the game. You've got one last play, and if your team scores, your team wins. But they have to score 6 points. They can't kick a field goal. And so they line up, and they run the play, and the quarterback tries to sneak it across, and you just can't tell if he made it or not. The officials huddle together, and they talk about it, and they decide that he didn't make it. He came up short of the goal line. Now, probably the reaction of your crowd and your team is going to be, but that's not fair. He made it. The other side is going, what? Woo! We won. That's great. Love that call. Now, what happens if the next day you find out that there was a guy off to the side and he was taping the play? And when they look at the tape, the ball clearly crossed the goal line. The team scored. They won legitimately. It was a bad call. Question: is the school that was given the victory, even though they really lost, is the team and all the people in the school going to go, well, we got to give that up? We've got to concede to the other team. I mean, after all, they really won the game. It's only fair that we just say, yeah, we got beat and change the record and everything. I don't think that's going to happen. Why? Because we love fair when it falls our way. Okay? When it doesn't fall our way, we kind of have a different reaction to it, don't we? I mean, let's be honest. There can be a real selfishness involved in the context of what is fair and unfair. Beautiful biblical illustration of this, I think, found in Matthew chapter 20, where you read about this man who is hiring laborers to go out and work in his vineyard. And he starts hiring them at 6 in the morning, and he tells them, I'm going to pay you a denarius, that's a day's wage for your work. But through the day, periodically, he hires more guys until right up late in the evening, like 5 o'clock before they're going to shut down at 6, he's still hiring people. When they shut down, he starts paying them. And he pays the guys who'd only worked an hour or 2 or 3 a denarius. Well, the fellows who've worked all day come up there, and when they get paid a denarius, they get bent out of shape. Now, wait a minute. We worked all day, and you're only paying us a denarius, and these guys maybe worked an hour, and they got paid. What do you suppose the reaction is? That's not fair. What's the master say? Guys, you agreed to work for a full day for a full day's wage. I'm not cheating you. What I'm paying you is not unfair. I have a perfect right to pay anybody who comes to work for me what I want to pay them. I did not cheat you. It was not, what I did was not wrong. It wasn't unfair. Now, what got in there? Selfishness, didn't it? I mean, those guys weren't treated unfairly, and yet they whine like they were treated unfairly. How often does that kind of thing happen in our lives when we get into this fair-unfair thing? Now, fairness is very important among God's people. No question about it. An excellent example of this, again from Scripture, I believe, is found in Acts chapter 6, where you have brethren coming and saying, listen, the Grecian widows aren't being treated like the Hebrew widows. It's not fair. And I think the churches and the apostles and the church's reaction is interesting. They go, well, then that needs to be corrected. That needs to be taken care of. And they immediately address it, don't they? They choose 7 men and they give them the responsibility to see that funds, food, whatever it is, are going to be distributed fairly, equitably, justly among all the widows. Why? Because that's only right. That's the way it ought to be. In James chapter 2, when James talks about this poor man coming in and sitting down, and a rich man coming in and sitting down, and how the church may react to them differently, what's he saying? It's not right, it's not just, it's not loving, it's not fair for you to treat a poor man in a lesser way than you would treat a rich man. Everybody deserves to be treated with equal respect. And that's absolutely true. That's correct. But I'd like to argue that for us, in our relationship with each other, fair ought to be the bottom line, brothers and sisters, not the top line. Our goal should be way more than just fairness in the way that we treat each other. Look at the example of the Lord. What was fair about the cross? It's probably the most unfair thing that's ever happened on the face of this earth. A perfect man who never committed a sin, who always taught and did what was right, is tortured and murdered and spat upon and vilified and criticized. What is fair about that? Absolutely nothing is fair about that. Was justice served when he did that? Yes, in that very unfair act, he paid the price for you and me. Brothers and sisters, it's a good thing God's not fair when it comes to the way that he deals with us and he treats us. Jesus went to the cross so that justice could be done, but it's interesting to me that here you find justice and fairness in a very interesting juxtaposition. Okay? Jesus receiving this incredibly unfair treatment so that you and I could be spared having to suffer what he suffers, separation from God. And so I believe that our relationship with each other should be dictated by how God treats us. Does God treat us fairly? Oh, absolutely. Yes, he does. But does God go way beyond fair to loving and merciful and kind and tender and forgiving and graceful? Yes, he does. And I think that needs to be our goal. That needs to be what we strive for. Sure, we're fair. But brothers and sisters, let's go beyond fair to loving and graceful and tender and kind and caring like our God. Because when we love like he loves, when we care like he cares, I believe that is when the world, as Jesus says in John 13, is truly going to see who we are. God bless you in your discussion this evening. Thank you.
In our hearts, Lord.